Greetings to everybody worldwide. I'm Dave Kassler. I'm at your radio call sign KE0OG, and welcome to this Saturday's live stream. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and to share the questions and just chat among each other. Looking at some things here, today in the United States is a special day. We call it Pearl Harbor Day. It's the day in December 7th, 1941, when our battleship fleet at Pearl Harbor was set upon by the Japanese raiders and really was quite a setback for us. Ironically, it was a warning from the Japanese to stay out of the war, but it did exactly the opposite and galvanized the nation. And it was a hard-fought battle, and my father was part of that battle. He fought in the Battle of Leyte Gulf and was in the South Pacific. He passed away recently. I would also like to mention the Super Chat. If you look at your chat thing there, where it says say something, there is a little icon for the emojis, and then next to it's a $sign. If you click on the $sign, you can send a super chat that is basically any dollar amount that you might like to provide as support to ham radio answers, and would be greatly appreciated. I also want to mention we had some garbled questions again today. I don't know what is wrong with my website, dkassler.com, but these people right here, Alexei Severid and Alfred Archer, both sent me questions, and they were both garbled by the system. So if you could please resend those. It would be good if you could send those to ham radio answers at gmail.com. They're much more likely to get through, and plus, if you send it to hamradioanswers at gmail.com, you can attach pictures or diagrams or whatever, which you cannot with the web system. Hello, Kirk. Thank you very much. We've got people from over Europe and other places, and in several spots in the U.S. Hello from Don. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. About halfway through, I'll check the email address, Ham Radio Answers email address, and see if those questions came back from Alexei or Alfred. My father's name was Alfred, by the way. It's not a common name today, and his middle name was even more unusual, Alwyn. And people kept misspelling it as Alvin. Okay, so as you all know, I have regular YouTube videos. If you go to youtube.com/Dave Kassler, DAVECASLER, you can find my regular video channel. The most recent video up was on the ICOM 7610, which is a radio I've been loaned to use for a couple months and do some videos about it. And Australia is here. Hello. Good morning, Brent. Okay, let's take a look at the questions that we have here. Questions. This one is from Hiroshi Asada, who has call sign W1CFA. And he says he enjoys my videos. Has a question regarding a G5RV. Are you familiar with this type of an antenna? Yes, I am. Let me go to the overhead here and show a G5RV. We'll take these off. I need to clean this board. Okay, a G5RV, a full-size one, is 102 feet long. Sorry, I don't have that in meters. Okay, and it's fed with a length of ladder line. Okay, and in theory, you need to get this up off the ground a fair distance, 30 to 40 feet if you can. So 10 meters, 12 meters in the air. And then this right here is supposed to be 50 ohms. So you can put, if you want, a 1-to-1 balun and then run coax to your radio of presumably any length. Now, I will tell you right off the bat, this, by the way, I don't remember what the exact length is, but it's people who make them to that length. They're a common antenna. They were very popular 30 or 40 years ago. The fellow who did them, G5RV, was a British ham who popularized this antenna. They've sort of fallen out of favor in favor of off-center fed dipoles, which seem to work a little bit better, but some people find that this antenna works very well for it. In theory, you don't need a tuner, but what you really need is a wide range tuner, because these things kind of have a mind of their own. I had one briefly and took it back because I had all sorts of trouble matching the thing, and I had the money either for the antenna or for a small antenna tuner, so I took this back and then got the antenna tuner. So anyway, that's a G5RV, and what Hiroshi is asking about is how it works and how to make one. There are all sorts of plans on the internet. The transition between the ladder feed and the coax cable can be a 1-to-1 balun. It doesn't have to be. You can connect directly. But if you do, it'd probably be good to coil up some coax there as a choke balun. He says he has 2 tall trees, which are about 40 meters or 120 feet apart. That's plenty of room for this antenna. The midpoint happens to be over the roof, and the balun will probably be in the air. Just do a choke balun. It keeps from having the weight. Granted, it takes 25 feet of coax to create a choke balun, but the thing should be strong enough to hold that up. The coax that you use to make the choke balun, use RG8X or something like that. It's a lighter coax and won't add a lot of weight to that. Good luck with your trials with that. It may work very well for you, and it may not. So I think dipoles are far more predictable, but the G5RV is supposed to be an 80 through 10 OZ2 AFN. Thank you very, very much, and very much appreciated. And the just out of curiosity here, it's in some other currency, DKK. I'll have to look that up. Google makes the interpretation. Okay, so the G5RV actually was designed to be a multi-band antenna. There's something called the G5RV Junior, which will do 40 and up. Don suggests checking the ZS6BKW, which is a multiband variant. If it has traps in it, there's nothing really wrong with a trap dipole. You will lose a little heat in each trap. I think I would recommend a trapped dipole over the G5RV anyway. As you can tell, I'm not really enamored of the G5RV. Some people love them. I am one of the people who doesn't. You might try an off-center fed dipole, or just if you're just going to work two bands, say 40 and 20, which are the two bands I usually work, a simple trap dipole from MFJ will probably save you money over winding your own traps and everything, and they're not very expensive. In fact, I think probably less than the G5RV. Okay, this is from Jackson, KY4ECS. Recently got his ticket, I'm assuming a technician ticket, so congratulations to you, Jackson. He's KY4ECS. Says, forgive me because I'm sure you've done a video on this topic. Well, I've done 236 S-Day videos so far, so there is a chance, but there's a lot of topics to cover in ham radio. What radio should I use to get started in 2 meters and 70 centimeters? Well, it depends. He's looking at a few Icons and Kenwood's mobile models for a desktop setting. I have the Yaesu 7800. I think the current version is the 7900. It's a very simple two-band FM radio with all the usual bells and whistles. Now, in your local area, you need to find out, probably from club members or other people on the air, which digital mode is common. Here in this area, all the local repeaters are just FM, except for a rumored repeater over on Log Hill that I have yet to be able to hit, that is DMR. There is a DMR repeater in Grand Junction, otherwise they are FM. And so you want to find out from your club members what's most popular in your area, DMR or D-Star, or in some pockets, C4. I keep getting that confused with the military acronym, C4ISR. C4FM, something like that. It's System Fusion. The one that has been the most popular has been D-Star. But DMR is very rapidly overcoming all those barriers and is becoming the most popular digital mode. I would recommend, if I may make a recommendation, I have no financial interest in Bridgecom Systems. Bridgecom, C-O-M, Systems, or is it two M's? I don't know. Bridgecom Systems. Google it. Bridgecomsystems.com. They sell the AnyTone radios, and they have some rigs, mobile rigs of the kind that you're looking at for your desktop setting, that are half the price of a comparable ICOM or Kenwood. The AnyTone brand is very high quality, and you can get what they will sell you is the both FM and DMR radio that's dual band, that you could use at home. Another place, if you want to get the Japanese radio, is get it at DX Engineering or Ham Radio Outlet. There are a number of other places available that will make those available. If you're going to buy an AnyTone radio, buy it from Bridgecom. They are the official U.S. distributor, and you'll get support for your radio, and they have lots of training videos. Now, if you buy your radio from HRO, don't expect support from Bridgecom. I mean, that's kind of like, yeah, okay, you didn't buy it there. They will send you to HRO for support, and HRO doesn't have any. So they're just a sales outfit. So that's a long way around the barn. I have a D878UV plus handheld plus a D878UV handheld. They're wonderful handhelds, easy to program, and so on. So, okay, hope that helped. DKK is Danish kroner. All right. Thank you. G5RV is double size and works great for me in all bands except 60 meters. 60 meters is not harmonic with anything in ham radio, so you're going to end up using a separate antenna for that. From Michigan, Canada, all FM fusion repeaters in your area, then you want to go with the ASU? We should get, yeah. Hello from the UK to Echo 0, Oscar Charlie November. Okay. Let's see. This next one is from Bob Slovick, who is a patron and a longtime patron, longtime supporter of this station and or this channel. Very much appreciated, Bob, all the things that you offer and the comments that you make on videos. Has some fairly expensive test equipment with N connectors. I'll show you an N connector. This is my, let's get the overhead here. This is my Rig Expert, and it is a the AA230 Zoom, and it comes with an N connector. I'll take the adapter off here. Okay, this is made in the Ukraine, so they're using the European model. In Europe, these N connectors are, let me get my hand around here so that'll focus. I think it will focus. There. There's a place for a pin inside. And then this is the opposite of the N connector. The thing about the N connector that's important is that it does not present any kind of impedance bump as the signal travels through the connector, whereas this is the SO239 part here, and you connect a PL259 to that. This particular antenna measuring instrument, antenna analyzer, that particular antenna analyzer being made in Europe comes with the European norm, which is the N connector. They really like them over there. In fact, all the radios that we're familiar with sell over there, but with N connectors. It's technically a better connector, less loss, doesn't have the reflection problem, anything like that. But in the US, the PL259 and the SO239, so-called UHF connectors, are much more common. Now, what Bob's question is, do you see any advantage to put a male-female connector over the test ports to reduce wear and tear on the connector on the test equipment itself? Well, of course, on this, we have to put it on in order to use it. It comes this way. It comes with the connector there. So you get your wear and tear here, but that's still going to wiggle this connector, and that's up against plastic. So at some point it will get loose, probably after years of use. The metal connectors are actually pretty sturdy. Test equipment usually has BNC connectors because BNC have been done for years, have been the standard equipment on test equipment. On low power ham gear in the US, people have been putting BNC connectors on instead of the SO239. So when I build a radio kit and it's got that little SO2 or BNC, then I have to get an adapter for that so that I can use it with my antennas. All my antennas have PL259s on them. A lot of people swear by the BNC, saying it's a better connector. It won't take a lot of power, but for, like, my oscilloscope is all BNC. My signal generator is all BNC. And all the standard test cables and everything are BNC. They're strong. I wouldn't worry about the wear and tear on them. The one thing that can wear with time is this center conductor here. Has got sort of the connectors are somewhat springy in there, so they'll make good contact. With many years of use, many years of use, those springs will lose their spring with time. I've never seen it to be a problem, and I've worked with some mighty old equipment. So I think it'll come down to personal preference. I don't think that there's a solid reason based on best practices or anything to do that. Every time you add a connector piece in between two pieces of two pieces of coax, you add something in between, you're going to get loss and reflections. So I would advise against it, but I would say it's personal preference. Okie dokie. Let's see. I need to close that so I can see the time. This one is from Bill KC1JTS. Recently built a QRP Guys digital DSP radio kit that uses a Vox-type push-to-talk circuit. The problem with Vox means voice-operated relay. And what that means is it's set up so that all you have to do is talk into the mic and the radio goes into transmit. They're used to be very popular with vacuum tube gear. It's not so popular nowadays. I use a foot switch with my Yaesu FTDX 3000. And right now, working with the ICOM, I'm just using the hand mic, and it's real easy to push the push-to-talk button. I don't like Vox because the slightest little sound in the shack will set it off. Now, the problem that Bill is having here is he recently went portable and was trying to drive it with the USB sound card dongle. Let me show you one of those. Well, maybe I won't be showing you one of those. It's really small. That's the problem. Here it is. It's hiding from me. It's disguised as a USB sound card dongle. It's USB on one end, and on the other end, you've got your earphone over here, microphone here. Okay. Now, the problem that he is running into is that this connector right here puts out a DC voltage, which is used to power the condenser mic that's in the headset. It's very common in PCs. They'll put a little voltage on there to help power the mic. Okay? And he talks about the fact that some of these will do what's called split rail, since they don't have a minus supply, but that only leaves 2.5 volts. That may not be a much for what's in there. You get a 5-volt power supply as part of the USB plug. And the problem is that little voltage, 1.3 volts DC, on the headset and mic of the dongle will cause his Vox to close and go into transmit. So what I would suggest for you instead of the it says the QRP Guys radio doesn't have a DC blocking capacitor on the input to the Vox push to talk. What would you recommend for DC blocking cap value? I wouldn't. What I would recommend is that you go to a audio isolation transformer. The audio isolation transformers are about the size of the tip of your little finger. They used to be readily available at Radio Shack, but now you'll have to go to like adafruit.com or sparkfun.com, someplace like that, and order a couple of those little isolation transformers. So you take your audio out of this, run it through the isolation transformers and to your radio. That will get rid of the DC component. It will also preserve the fidelity of the audio. So that's what I would recommend for that. They're cheap. I mean, max couple bucks each. Maybe someone has one maybe one of the listeners can give me a Amazon link for those little audio transformers. They're 600 ohm each way, which should match this and should match your radio input. So that's what I would recognize there. Let's take just a little peek up here at the let's see. Morning from Mark, thank you. Just trying to go back. Yeah, the ZS6, okay. Tom loves his A230 zoom. It's a wonderful antenna analyzer. It's my go-to analyzer of choice. Which model is my rig expert? It's an AA230 zoom. MFJ259C has the end connector. It came with the PL259 adapter. Let's see. Yeah, BNC with the thin Ethernet coax, but not for very great lengths. Tech 514AD scope from 57 has all SO239 inputs. Interesting. Yeah, that thing would need some resurrection. Hello from wet San Diego. I heard you guys are getting plastered out there. That's probably great for filling up the reservoirs, but not good for much else because you'll get all mudslides where all the burn scars are. When I was growing up in Los Angeles, it was standard we'd get fires in September and floods in October. And there'd just be, houses in the canyons that would go sliding down the hill every year. People would just rebuild, and then the same thing would happen. Let's see, weird screw-in connectors. Yeah. Tony just passed his tech exam today. Congratulations. TSA office in your area. Randy Cox, what question? Any tips for taking radio equipment through airport security for vacation? The first question is going to be the lithium-ion battery. You can take the radio, but not a spare battery in your onboard luggage, and talk to your carrier about spare batteries in the luggage. They may not like them. The problem with those lithium-ion batteries is that they work great under normal conditions. If they're under stress for whatever reason, they can burn. Let's see. What's San Diego? Congrats, a lot of people. Congratulations, great. Welcome to ham radio. Yeah, amateur radio rather than ham radio, that is true. Easy Digi on eBay, okay. How much value can I place on the claim that a broadband vertical antenna without radio has a fairly flat SWR 80 through 10? Well, my dummy load has a flat SWR from 80 through 10. I tend to distrust vertical multiband antennas that are not half-wave electrical, but that claim to need no radials or counterpoise. I just have an issue believing that. I mean, you're welcome to try it. How much of a problem is the third harmonic interference in a 2-meter Yagi when the 70-centimeter Yagi is transmitting on the same band? Talking about Richard is also a longtime patron. The issue, first of all, most of the rigs today really don't produce much in the way of harmonic content. They've got good output filtering. So this is not going to be something that you'll need to be worrying about. The antennas that have both 2-meter and 70-centimeter on them, there's a couple multiband antennas that way. There's also the one where they're perpendicular to each other that's used for handheld satellite use. We've got a guy here doing that. DX is difficult with a dummy load. It is true. Has been done, but I've not done it. When I want to simulate a strong incoming signal here, I put another radio on a dummy load, and it gets enough over that I can get a pretty strong signal. I'm interested in this QRP Guys digital DSP radio, and I'm going to go looking for it. So I'm going to leave that one out a little bit. Okay, this is from Ian Penny, and Victor Echo 3 India November Papa. He has created for himself a balun. This is a 9-to-1 balun from a kit. Okay, so the turns ratio is 3-to-1. And then he shows me the Smith chart of it. The part that is right in the center is where it should be. And that's this point down here where it has its lowest. And I'm trying, he starts at 1 megahertz, stops at 30 megahertz, and it's around 15 megahertz that it does its best. It should be the 20-meter band. What should the Smith chart look like ideally? Well, it should be a dot in the center ideally, but it's not going to be. I would assume that when you did this testing that you had an appropriate 450 ohm resistor here that was purely resistive and not inductive. If you had a purely resistive resistor here, it should be 450 ohms. And then do your testing here, this should be 50. And then you should get something that's fairly near the center here. Okay. I don't know very much about Smith charts. They're not emphasized in the American curriculum for the amateur extra class. They're mentioned, but they're nothing of any significance in there. All the new antenna meters will give you a Smith chart. And Smith charts actually were designed for transmission lines. And I really should learn more about it because, the new antenna handbook from the ARRL has more emphasis on it. Since everybody has access to them now, people are using them a lot more in determining whether or not their antennas work and so on. This is from Rico DG5BQ, Delta Golf 5 Bravo Quebec, which would be a German call, or something associated with Germany, like a former, well, his his email address ends in .de, so that would make it European Germany. There were German colonies in Africa, and one of the video series that I watched, the Can-Do-rist, it means can-do tourist, is an aviation blog by a guy who's from Namibia. He is Caucasian, and he is from there, so he grew up speaking German and was able, I guess, just simply by virtue of being from Namibia, able to get a German passport. He does very interesting videos, by the way. There was another guy who wanted to fly around the world, so this guy flew around the world as his pilot. Anyway, let's look at Rico's question. He likes the videos. Since I still have these problems with RF in my RV, recreational vehicle, creating a light show with the LED lights. Everything on modern RVs is LED lights. We've got one that's a couple years old. Everything on it is LED. Search around the internet for a solution. A choke might help. So I found this website he mentions on chokes. It shows that a choke is not always the right one. What you're going to want to do is ground or use your RV chassis, which is steel, as your counterpoise for whatever antenna that you're putting up. Short of driving a ground rod wherever you are, which is very difficult because the problem is getting them out of the ground when you leave, and the places you stay won't want it left there. They're difficult to get out. You need a truck with a winch to pull those out. So yes, connect the braid of the coax to the chassis of the RV to give the RF a good reference. Yes, absolutely. Just like you would do in a mobile installation on a car. You would do the same thing. Now, the mag mount antennas that go up on the roof of the car have a piece of foil on the bottom which is connected to the braid of the coil, and it couples capacitively to the steel roof, and that's your counterpoise for the vertical or ground plane, if you want to call it that. But yes, use the RV as a counterpoise for your antenna. Definitely would do that. Now, you may have to put little chokes, the snap-on chokes, around some of the wires to your LED lights to keep those from acting as antennas, because otherwise they will act as antennas. Some of those runs in there are pretty long. Rico, I hope that helps. If it doesn't, we'll try again. Send an answer back. This is from William Clarkson N6 Hotel Bravo Echo. Is there any method to manually delete a memory location saved to a TYY TH-UV8000D radio? I reviewed the 8000E, and the only difference between the D and the E is the E has built-in crossband repeater. So far, I just overwrite memory locations, and I think that's what you have to do. Other than, now, I understand that Chirp now supports the 8000D and E. Chirp is, I think, a lot easier to use than the TYT software. Plus, using Chirp allows you to move settings from one machine to another. So far, he's just overwritten memory locations. I think that's what you've got to do. I know of no method to zero it other than a factory reset, but then that'll zero everything. So I think you're doing the right thing. Just overwrite it if you don't want it. If the reason you want to get rid of it is because, thank you, Jeff, is because you're scanning and you don't want it to keep stopping on that scan channel. You can modify that in memory so that it won't stop on that channel. I found that useful when I have one of the channels set up to the local FAA weather radio. And they're at about 160 megahertz, somewhere in there. And 162 something. There's 10 channels for that, and I think channel 4 is our local one for Montrose. And I don't want it to get stuck on that during a scan, so I've got that marked to skip the scan on that one, to skip that channel. This is from Chip NN4U. After a 30-year detour via the Marine Corps, I returned to amateur radio last year and am indebted to you for getting my ham knowledge back up to speed. Thanks. My next research project is, will transmitted RF energy melt ice off my tri-band? Probably not. And here's why I say so. Your antenna has two resistances, and the resistances are the radiation resistance, which you want as close to 50 ohms as possible, and your ohmic resistance, which is you want as close to 0 as possible. Now, you can't have 0 because it's real world metal and there's going to be some resistance, but you still want it as low as possible. Now, when you transmit, water will change the coax, the permittivity. Trying to remember just which it is, but it will cause refraction, but it's only that thick, and so it's not going to do it very much because you're going to get some going in and some going out. The bending process of refraction does not consume any energy. Okay, so the simple fact that radio waves are going through water is not going to cause them to attenuate. Now, if that water were salt water, that'd be a different story. It would attenuate like crazy, and that'd be a great way to heat it up and get it off your antenna. But clear water, rainwater, won't do that. Or else it'll be so radioactive you don't want to be near it. I'm reading a book about the big disaster at Chernobyl, and it was really something, I tell you. If you had a bunch of radioactive fallout in your area, of course, you'd have bigger problems than just an antenna. Now, your ohmic resistance will create a little bit, but let's say you're transmitting 100 watts. Let's say you're transmitting 1,000 watts, and the ohmic resistance is an ohm, maybe an ohm. Okay, so you've got not more than, well, let's say 10 watts lost as heat in the antenna, but it's spread over the entire antenna. And that's not really enough to cause the ice to melt. Now, what you can do, but this is dangerous, is to wiggle your rotor back and forth. If you wiggle your rotor back and forth, you'll kind of shake it up a little bit and you might get some ice. But the problem with that is if the ice that's in the center of an element breaks, then it's not helping to hold up the rest of the element and can cause element collapse. So you don't want that to happen. I think the best thing to do is to wait for the sun to melt it. I don't think you're going to get any other thing. Now, the ice itself is not conductive because it's rainwater, not seawater. If it were seawater, it'd be very conductive, and you just send up a DC current. But can't do that. This is from Tim Boyd, AA4SS. And Tim asks, do you have any videos on 160 meter antennas? No, I don't. I've never operated 160 because of the antenna size. However, I won this in a ham fest It's an ARRL book. It's not very thick, and it sells for $22.95. It's got some chapters in here on short antennas for 160 meter radio. And unless you've got a quarter wave tower, which would be 130 feet long, tall, okay, and you use the tower itself to transmit, you won't have a full-size antenna for 160 meters. Now, some people who have very tall towers, who are tall enough, you can load up a tower on 160 meters. This one shows you how to make some relatively short antennas. And the shorter antenna, of course, is a compromise antenna, but it is... well, you know, a lot of people get on 160. It's called the gentleman's band, and it's used for DX to Europe and so on. So give it a try. If you want to get that book or look it up in the antenna book or something like that, you can find it's basically they're all vertical antennas, and they because if you do a horizontal antenna, it's going to be NVIS unless you get that thing way in the air. I mean, way in the air. A half meter, 80 meters, 240, 250 feet in the air to get up to your huge dipole. Man, you need something really tall to do that. So that would be a problem. Let's see. I'm going to go back here just for a little bit. Alan W2AEW has a YouTube video on Smith charts. I'll have to take a look at that. Whoops. For some reason, Neil, I don't know why, they held up your comment, but your comment was no problem. And just shows you how good YouTube's artificial intelligence is. They aren't. Very hot and burning Australia. Yes, I understand you have terrible problem with wildfires right now. And that's a perpetual problem in Australia, is those wildfires. You get enough rain to grow something, and then the fire comes through and takes care of it. Watched a demo of satellite QSOs today. It is pretty cool stuff. Let's see. Email the heat to Chicago. Yes, wouldn't it be nice if we could do that? We have lots of rain here in British Columbia. I think that's your middle name, isn't it? We were up there on an Alaska cruise, and we managed to get good weather most of the way. And the good weather actually was bad weather for the locals, because a lot of people there, they don't have water utilities, and everything is stone under the ground, so digging a well is not practical. So people collect rainwater off their roofs, which is normally enough. But while we were up there, it definitely wasn't enough, and people were struggling with water. We saw little rocks poking up through the waves, and they'd get a very thin cover of soil and then have trees growing. The trees had only the most tenuous hold to that rock, and a good strong wind would just peel everything off. So I hope Alaska's getting plenty of rain, especially right along the coast there. It's a very moderate climate right along the coast. You get inland, different story. 2 feet of snow in central Massachusetts. Want some? No, thank you. Smith charts are technology from 50 years. Nobody uses the nomographs on Smith charts. Yeah, a lot of people are used to the way they look. VK3, what is snow? Yes, well, from Australia. If you live down in Tasmania, in the very south tip, you probably know snow, but otherwise it's pretty warm. Any progress on my pilot's license, Dave? I doubt very much I would pass a Class 3 medical, which is required for private pilot's license, because I'm bipolar. And although it's under excellent control, I kind of get the feeling from the web that the FAA just plain doesn't ever waiver bipolar illness. Now, I might be able to get a sport pilot's license, which is much more limited than a regular private pilot's license. I'm slowly looking into it. I really would like to do it. It is definitely a bucket list item. BTV vertical in a tiny yard between two tall homes, 24 feet tall, works well on 40 meters, considering the big IR. Would the 20-meter range improve? Well, that depends. You know, the way the big IR does a 20-meter antenna is it just pulls that tape down, so it's half as long as it is for 40 meters. So it's near the ground. My HF9V actually electrically used the entire antenna to radiate on 20 meters. And so that would give it a little bit of help there. Another thing you can do, well, of course, the big IR antenna is quite tall. It's a full wavelength, or full quarter wavelength on 40 meters. So that's 33 feet. 20 meters. 10 meters high, quarter wavelength. I don't know if you can raise the thing and put some elevated radials on it, you might have really good luck there. Let's see, from KE0KRO, have you ever done a video on using the Easy NEC software? I have. I've done several videos where I have used it. I don't know that I have done one specifically about it. I'm not terribly impressed with the user interface on it. It reminds me very much of my early days in computing, where you had to pre-compute all the stuff to put into it. And actually setting up the antenna can be an exercise in getting that thing set up. But it does work. I've used it and do have videos on it. And let's see, inland on the border of the states of Victoria and New South Wales. Kind of like the reciprocal of Idaho, yes. Hopefully no heavy water on your antenna either, Dave. No, that definitely bring the antenna down. And they call 3 Mile Island a disaster. It did melt down. That was a disaster. It, however, was well contained. The containment vessel at 3 Mile Island was not duplicated at Chernobyl. Chernobyl did not have the equivalent containment vessel. Chernobyl also melted down. And the problem with it was it blew the top off the building. And so the nuclear fire plus the graphite, which is just carbon, burned like crazy. And for quite a bit of time spread enormous quantities of nuclear radioactive material over huge swaths of Europe. And there's still a containment zone there. And then, yeah, you know, a lot of the environmental people have very mixed feelings about nuclear, because nuclear has no carbon dioxide emissions. There's some heat emitted, but that's easy enough to get rid of. There's no pollutants, except when they explode, like Chernobyl did. The Chernobyl design was so big that the instrumentation really didn't tell them what was going on in the core. And you could have a reaction going on in part of the core and not know it. So it was, yes, as you say here, very bad design. And I don't know, you know, nuclear energy, it's letting the nuclear genie out of the bottle. There are much newer designs that are self-stopping, And they've had them around for years and years and years and years, decades and decades of nuclear reactor designs that if you lose everything, they shut down automatically. And without any fancy control rods or anything like that have to happen. The thing about them, of course, is it takes work to keep them going, but they shut themselves down. That is good. And I don't know. Now, what is happening is that solar power is getting so cheap because of all the research into automobile batteries for electric cars. Plus, the panels have come down to less than $1 a watt, and that's at retail. I bought a 250 watt panel for $229. They're getting so cheap that it's really starting to approach the point where it's going to be cheaper than natural gas to build and maintain and operate a solar station. Now, around here in Colorado, we drive around and we'll see just fields full of solar panels. And you go out in some places in the desert and you'll see those, just fields full of solar panels. It's a much lower tech solution than nuclear power, but the battery is the key thing because then they can release that power at night when people need it. So lots of things happening in renewable energy. Let's see. The Soviet reactor was totally irresponsibly designed. True. Stalin-era technology, well, yeah, updated a little bit from that. It's on a lake that's 40 miles long and 700 feet deep. What do you think of a quarter-wave inverted L, 80-meter antenna, half going up and the rest sloping up to a tree? I did a little bit of work in EZNEC with a vertical tilted over, and I was surprised how well it worked. So it might work well for that. Okay, and John Buck has to take off. How is the IC7610? I like it. I'll be doing more videos on it. How to tune for 40 and 10 meters. Wide range tuner. Or follow the instructions. Is there much QRN from wind turbine generators? No. Yeah. They're all different kinds. Gray, thank you. There's tech to use for nuclear waste fuel, yes. Or you can get breeder reactors, which breed their fuel. Biggest problem with reactors is what to do with the spent fuel rods, yes. And you know what people have done? They just store them on site. It's probably the worst place in the world to store them. They're stored on site because there's no place to go put them. Pebble bed reactors, the Chinese just won't even look at these. Refuses to look at waste storage. Understand some solar panel can emit RFI. What's emitting the RFI is not the solar panel, but the inverter on the back of it. They make these inverters as cheaply as they can for 120 volt intertie systems. And the panel will create RFI in there because it's a switching device to not only turn the power from DC to AC, but boost it from 24 or 48 up to 120. And they use switching transistors in there, which put out some pretty strong transients. Solar City, now Tesla array, have generated over 12 megawatts since 2016. Don, good for you. I'd love to see a picture of that. Can you send me one to Ham Radio Answers? The new liquid metal battery, so on. There's lots of really cool stuff. Want to borrow a FTDX 101D to test? Not now. I'm so far behind. I've got, I had a vendor from San Diego call me yesterday and said, when are you ever going to do a video on my hotspot? I said, all right, I'll do it next. Power signal from the inverters. Well, here's the thing. You can put out into the grid. You can put a square wave on the grid, and the grid is tuned for 60 hertz. So any frequency components other than 60 hertz are not going to propagate through the system. So people try to use that to get away with doing poor stuff. Solar farms, yes. Charlie has K0LAF has a system that's generated 68 megawatt hours since October of 2015. I run my station on solar, by the way. I've got a panel right out there that does that. This is from Dori Rubinstein. We have 2 left. Let's go ahead and finish them up. Good evening. Saw your YouTube about explanations of the AnyTone 878 Plus. Oh, Don. Let me tell you what Don's problem is. He has an Israeli call sign, but he purchased his radio in the Netherlands. And the radio, quite properly, was set up for the European band plan. 144 to 146 megahertz. They only have 2 megahertz on 2 meters. And 430 to 440 megahertz. It's 10 megahertz. And he's going crazy because he can't transmit outside that band. Well, the radio's been set up at the manufacturer to do that. Are there codes to unlock that? I'm sure there are, but I don't know what they are, and even if I did, I wouldn't be giving them out because that radio was sold to operate in Europe, and it won't transmit outside of the ham bands there. The newer ones that are being sold here in the U.S., the AnyTone D878, are also set up to the U.S. band plan and cannot transmit. Now, I have heard from some people that they kind of screwed that up because not only do they not transmit outside the ham band, they won't receive outside the ham band. And it's nice to be able to get the weather radio or listen to something else. And a lot of these have FM broadcasts that you can receive and so on. But Don, I don't think there's a solution for your problem other than to buy a radio in Israel. I don't know what your band allocations are in Israel. But I think that's what's going on. You see, I've actually advocated for years that the Chinese radio manufacturers set them up so that wherever you're sending, wherever the radio is sold, it operates only in the ham bands for that area. And I guess they're starting to do that now a little bit. And this last one is from John K8NIV. I've been watching a few of your videos and would like to ask if I went to a loop dipole. Well, there's a loop and there's a dipole. They're not the same thing. Gain anything compared to using an end-fed antenna. It's personal preference. Your end-fed antenna is probably working fine. And it's good for lots of different bands. If you were to create a loop, a horizontal loop, you'd want it to be at least one full wavelength at the lowest band you're going to operate. And you want to feed it with ladder line and use a very wide range tuner, well, a wide range tuner, 10 to 1 SWR, to feed it because you're going to need that tuner. The loop, you can also do vertical loops. And vertical loops, depending on how you feed them, can be either vertically or horizontally polarized. Some people swear by them. I would just have trees in the property, some tall and some about 20 feet, benefit from a loop antenna. I have a tree out back that's close to the shack. I could use what looks to be like 30 feet tall. I think that would be a little low for vertical loop. I would stick with your end-fed. I think you've probably got a good antenna there. Let's see just the last little bit here. Steve from Kuwait City. What online resources do you recommend to learn more about Summits on the Air? I would look that up on Google, Summits on the Air. SOTA, S-O-T-A. Look up S-O-T-A also. You might find some really good stuff. People who are into SOTA are really into SOTA. If my neighbor has a solar panel system emitting RFI, is there a countermeasure for this? Well, you can talk to the neighbor and talk to the installer of the panels and see if they'll put ferrite beads on the outputs of each of the solar panels, but that would require dismounting every solar panel. It's switching power supply noise, so regular noise blanker might help a little bit, I think. I'll talk to the neighbor and see what the installer can do, because technically they're not supposed to be emitting that, and they are under Part B certification, which says that if they cause interference to you, they have to stop that. It's a little hard to do that. Use your very, very best diplomatic skills when you do that. Okay, very good. And people asking each other about sizes of systems and so on sounds great. Thank you all so very much for this, on this day that we pause to remember those who gave their lives at Pearl Harbor in defense of the United States, the beginning of the U.S. entry into World War II, the beginning of the end of the expansionism of the Japanese empire. Of course, now we're very, very closely allied with Japan, just as we are with all of Europe, in spite of what kind of messes you may hear on the news. Those alliances stand strong. So thank you very much for your time. I'm going to say 73, and now that we're in December, I'm going to say Happy Holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year. A lot of different holidays in a lot of different lands coming up this time, and I wish the very best for all of you. Please click like, please subscribe, please tell your friends about this channel, and have them consider subscribing. And until we next meet, 73.